So to start off, just tell me about yourself and what is your connection with Trinity? Ellie, do you want to start?
I'll go first. Sure. Actually, I've been there. I just added it up over 50 years. So I'm really connected at the hip here. I was married to Bill Chapman, who was the rector at Trinity for about nearly 25 years, starting in 1970. So I guess that's my direct connection. But I've actually been a pretty active parishioner during that time. Amy, you go.
Okay, well, thanks to Ellie here, I became a member of Trinity. Ellie was one of my college professors, and I met her in around about 1986. And we struck up a conversation one day in the copy room while I was working and she was working. And I explained that I was a lesbian and, how hard it was to find a Christian church that, wouldn't, threaten you with hell and damnation. And she just very kindly explained that she was married to the rector of this wonderful parish in the Central West End. And I'd be welcome anytime, and she didn't proselytize too hard. And so I came, and the rest is history. My original upbringing was liberal Presbyterian. Okay. So it was a leap into the Episcopal Church. And I do remember I called my mother to tell her I was going to become an Episcopalian. And I asked her if she minded. And she said, "Oh, no, honey, I'm just so glad you believe in something."
Mm-hmm. And so, Amy, you you wrote articles for the Post-Dispatch for quite a while in the 90s. How did you get that job opportunity?
Well, it was about that time that other newspapers around the country were beginning to feature gay voices, Victoria Brownworth and such. And my partner at the time, Alexa Strongheart, said, "Well, why don't you ask the Post-Dispatch if they'd be interested?" So I did, and they were, and we went from there. I don't think it ran for a lot longer than I thought it would. It was a monthly guest commentary. I was not a Post-Dispatch employee at that time. Mm-hmm. But my background is not journalism, and I think they probably were not ecstatic about that, but they hired me on anyway
Yeah. Was the community at Trinity supportive of your role there?
Oh, yes. So let me tell you this great story. So they had just published like my first piece, and it was around Lent. Mm-hmm. So I went to the Maundy Thursday foot washing service, and so I went up and presented my foot to Bill to be duly washed and dried. Mm-hmm. And he was, kneeling down, and he looked up at me and just said in the most deadpan, quiet voice, he said, "We canceled our subscription to the Post-Dispatch today." And I just lost it. I mean, only Bill. Mm-hmm. But yes, Trinity was more than supportive. I couldn't have asked for more support. Everybody's just thrilled.
Ellie, you knew and mentored many young gay men and lesbian women who found their way to Trinity like Amy. What do you think about Trinity drew them to the church and its community?
I don't know. I think, I don't know. I just think it's a good place to be. I think it's in a neighborhood that is certainly has always been comfortable for gays and lesbians. And I think the church has certainly been comfortable for all kinds of people. It's always seemed to me that it wasn't particularly for gays and lesbians. It's just for people, whoever.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. When I was sort of church shopping, I started, after I left the Presbyterian church, I started at Dignity, the Catholic gay and lesbian community. They had met every Sunday night at St. Henry's down in the city. And I really, really liked liturgy. But I wanted to belong to whatever faith I was engaged in. And I just didn't feel like I could, in good conscience, convert to Catholicism. And then, of course, I met Ellie, and Trinity is known for its Anglo-Catholic liturgy, which suited me just fine. But it was important to me not to seek out a strictly gay and lesbian church like MCC, and nothing against MCC at all. All kinds of people are drawn to Trinity. And in addition to that, what the other thing I was looking for is I was looking for a place where I could be fully part of the body, which meant that I could do anything that anybody else could do. I could be a lay Eucharistic minister, an usher, a greeter, a member of the choir, whatever. And that was a place where I could do that. So full communion.
So one thing that's associated with what you just said is that when we first came to St. Louis in 1969, there was a small group of gay men who had been meeting and calling themselves the Mandrake Society. And then some things happened, like there was an arrest on Halloween of a group of young men who were dressed up in gay, actually drag. And so some people from that migrated into the Mandrake Society. They were all guys, and they met every Sunday afternoon, and they came to Bill and said, we would really like to have an evensong service as part of our meeting. We would like to have evensong and then our meeting, and would you preside at the evensong? And Bill said, no, I wouldn't. He said, we will never have a service while I'm here that is just for gays or whoever. If there's a service of worship in this church, it's open to anybody who wants to come. And I think that was really important, that he sort of made it known that Trinity was not going to be a gay church or a lesbian church or a whatever church, that it was going to be a church for everybody. And I think that has held true through the years.
The next question I have here is for Amy. You wrote your monthly column during the AIDS epidemic, or I guess a little later than most of it, but what role did your spirituality play in writing those columns? Did you get any religious feedback, either negative or positive, or did your your response to that feedback, bring your spiritual and religious values into it?
Well, I think that, one of the things that happened during the AIDS epidemic was that, well, thanks to Nancy Reagan, in the medical community, the religious communities, just turned a blind eye and a deaf ear. No one was interested in finding anything out about that disease, because over time, it became clear that it was running rampant through the gay male community. And therefore, it was of no interest to anybody. So what happened was the gay community, the gay men, the lesbians, the bisexuals, we educated ourselves about that disease. We were the ones that learned. We went into the research. We found out, you know, what kinds of things were causing it, how it was transmitted. You know, clinics were set up all over the country by the gay community, not by the medical community, but by the gay community, to educate people about safe sex. We were the ones that took care of our own. We, you know, we held each other's hands. We fed and bathed each other, because no nursing home would take us, or gay men, I guess I should say. But and I remember when Father Buick was at Trinity, he was a priest that we had, who had AIDS. And when he got too sick to work, I recall that Bill Chapman went over and he would bathe him and feed him. And so, that being said, I mean, that is the essence of the Christian life, caring for the outcast. And certainly at that point, gay men were just absolutely anathema. Nobody wanted anything to do with them. And thank God for Elizabeth Taylor, who, you know, just said, screw you all. She just got out there with all her money and fame and just forced that issue right to the front. And, you know, eventually we learned more. But in the long story short, you know, if Christianity is about anything, it is about welcoming the other, caring for the marginalized, caring for the outcast, and there, you know, no one was more outcast than men with AIDS. I watched a number of them die, and it was hard. They didn't have their families to back them up. They died. Some of them died alone. It's just sad.
There was one funeral home here in the Central West End.
Yes.
I've forgotten Bayers. I can't remember the name. It started with B. Anyway, it was on Lindell, and they were the only ones that would deal with AIDS funerals. And I remember Bill going over and doing so many funerals at that funeral home.
Yeah. I believe I read that Bill held funerals for people who hadn't been a part of Trinity, because normally you have to be a member of the congregation to have a funeral service there. But for people whose home churches refused them funerals because they were gay. This question is kind of a big one. Writing was a common social and professional activity for lesbians in St. Louis, and including you, Amy. And you wrote for the Post-Dispatch. You contributed to the 1988 book, Our Families, Our Values, which was challenging the idea of traditional families and of traditional family values, and trying to find the gay people's place in there. And Ellie, you were a professor of journalism. Trinity has been introducing more inclusive liturgy over the years, such as using more gender-neutral language. How have you, as women and writers and Episcopalians, navigated liturgy that uses an overwhelmingly male image of God?
You know, I grew up with it, so it's, you know, it's ingrained in me. But I certainly think that language is critical to the human race. I mean, if you visit different cultures and different countries, everyone has different language for the same thing, and it frames it in a different way. So I think language is very important. The one thing that the downside for me of altering some of our gender specific language is that in doing so, we have lost a bit of the poetry. I'm not a big fan really of the what was it, 38 prayer book and some of that, but if you read through it, or the King James version of the Bible, for example, if you read through it, it's really disgustingly male oriented, but there's a cadence and an imagery to the language that in many respects is quite poetic. I think in some of our attempts to broaden and expand and include, we've lost a bit of that, but that, things come with time.
So it seems to me that some of the efforts at making it less gender specific have been so awkward that they're almost laughable. They come out sounding so, they just don't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my real problem is that I was born in 1928 and grew up for years and years and years, with hearing he. And it still sounds like, in my mind, it's not a man so much as it's a person. It's one of those fights that I have avoided.
Mm-hmm. Amy, you mentioned that the Anglo-Catholic liturgy at Trinity is part of what drew you there. Can you talk more about that?
Well, honestly, no, I can't. I really can't tell you what it is about the Anglo-Catholic liturgy that appeals to me. I recognize that it is definitely that kind of ritual is definitely not for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I don't think everyone, should participate in that, it's, but there's something about it. I find it very engaging for all of the senses, mm-hmm. the listening to the bells, smelling the incense, there's lots of kneeling and standing and, bowing and praying, and it engages the body as well as the sense. It's very visual. The vestments are rich and colorful. Many people find that just those trappings just ostentatious and irrelevant, and I get that. But for me, it works. My mind tends to wander a bit, as Ellie will tell you, and so that kind of a liturgy draws me in. The antiphonal responses and music, it engages me. It draws all of me in. That's what I like about it.
And I think the attention, all of what you said is very true for me. Mm-hmm. And the attention to the seasons.
Yes.
I love the rhythm of the seasons. And, that is enhanced by the change of vestments and all those things. They're really, I think, quite lovely.
Actually, that's a really good point, Ellie. When I got out here to Seattle, I did spend some time with the Quakers, which is as far away from Anglo-Catholicism as you could possibly go. And it was a good experience, a meaningful experience for me. But I find that I am at heart a liturgical person. And I also, the Episcopal Church put me in touch with the liturgical seasons even more than my Presbyterian upbringing did. And I do do like that. It's particularly now in this time of COVID, where time is almost meaningless. I mean, we haven't been able to go to church, so our week doesn't start till Monday, Tuesday. We're not going to work, so we don't mark our days Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Our sense of time is completely skewed right now, and so having a focus on the liturgical cycle does kind of help bring us back to the rhythm of the world, of the universe.
Just one final question I have. What can religious communities do to create a safer and more welcoming space for lesbians and other LGBTQ women?
I sort of go right back to where we were 5 minutes ago. That what can religious communities do to create a more welcoming space, period? I mean, I have problems with limiting. It seems to me they just need to welcome people.
I mentioned that I spent some time with the Quakers when I got out here. And there was something they did that I found most unusual, and I had not come across this before. There was a man at one of the meeting houses. There was a man who had been released from prison for sexual abuse of a minor. And this community, in conjunction with, prison authorities and his parole officer and social worker and whatnot, agreed to help him reintegrate into society. There was a great deal of monitoring that went on. But I had never come across a congregation that would do that before. So, and what that really said to me is that it's pretty easy to talk about being open and inclusive and welcoming when you get right down to the really difficult people, then you have to ask yourself, am I going to draw a line here, or, am I going to live out this value? And it's kind of tough. Yeah, I think the homeless are a good example. I think that certainly at Trinity has done a wonderful job of extending themselves to the homeless community. I think that food pantry is amazing, and it's with groceries and a nurse on available. You guys give out condoms. I mean, it's just crazy awesome. I don't know what we can do that we're not doing now. I mean, we are miles and miles away from where we were when I started at Trinity in just a few decades. I mean, most of the stuff in that book, Our Families, Our Values, is almost irrelevant now. We've really come that far. And I think the transgender community is certainly pushing us even farther into our ideas about gender and acceptance.
That's all the questions I have now. Are there any other stories you'd like to share?
Well, I think in summing up, I would just have to say that, I think first and foremost, whatever we're looking for or whatever we're trying to rectify, we just simply need to seek God. And what I do in my personal life is I just say, show me the way forward. I don't have to have it all figured out. I can see where I've been. I don't know where I'm going, but I just ask to be shown the way forward. And I think that applies to our institutions as well. Certainly we're just having a multitude of problems, like with the Methodist Church. I mean, human sexuality and gender identity are a big schism point for a lot of churches. And I don't know what the answers are. I mean, you have to be true to your own self, whatever that is. We may just continue to splinter and splinter and splinter and
looking, searching.
Yeah. But, the example of Jesus is all we have. The guy that, hung out with lepers and, drunks and tax collectors. I mean, he saw the seedy side of life and, was not offended by it.
Well, thank you both for talking with me today.